Hey everybody, it's Vanessa, the Crafty Gemini, and welcome to episode number 90 of WIP Wednesday, where I pop in here usually every Wednesday, same time, and we'll do some demos, and I mostly answer pre-submitted questions. So for those of you that maybe are tuning in new, there is a link in the video description box where you can submit questions that you'd like me to consider answering in a future episode. So let's make sure that y'all can see me and hear me. So if you can, just pop into the chat, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on Facebook, and let me know that you can see me and hear me fine so we can proceed. Hi everybody. Hey, Eunice is tuning in from Arizona. I see Julie is in the house from Scotland. Mary from Maryland. Tracy from Mississippi. Hey Janelle. We just had a mini bag sewing retreat this past weekend here in Florida. Janelle was one of the attendees, so I'm glad you made it back to home to Illinois, nice and safe. Great. Hey Margie, hi Jamie's another one of our retreaters that was here this past weekend. If you didn't get a chance to check out our Facebook page or my Instagram account, we shared some little video clips and pictures of some of the projects and the ladies making the bags that we tackled this weekend. It was super duper fun. Lots of stories and laughs were shared for sure. Okay, great. Y'all can see me and hear me, so we're gonna jump in and get started. I'm gonna keep this shot for now. Until we switch it over, because there's a couple things that I can't really show too small with this close-up camera angle here. The first question I have is from Sylvette, and she asks, is there a tote bag that looks good without lining and doesn't need to be birthed? So this is, birthing a bag is terminology that's often used in bag making, or maybe if you've made a zippered pouch, you've done it before too, where you have a separate exterior to a project and then a lining, and you leave a hole somewhere in the lining, and then you flip the whole thing right side out so that all the raw edges are concealed on the inside. So I thought this was a cool question. First, I will say, if a bag doesn't require a lining, unless it's made out of really thick fabric like a leather or something like that, it's usually going to be a little bit too flimsy if we're talking about making it with quilting cottons. And then a bag that doesn't need to be birthed means that it either is going to have a drop-in lining, which again, if you're not going to include a lining, it's going to be a little bit softer and flimsier. You can't really have the interfacing side, I would say, of like a fusible batting or something just exposed on the inside. So that's usually why when you're adding some type of interfacing to the inside, you have fabric on both sides so that it covers that up, okay? So I wanted to share with y'all a bag that I have that does have a lining but doesn't need to be birthed through an opening in the lining. And so that is my 2-hour tote, which is actually the bag that we put on sale this week only. And so I sent out an email, those of you that are on my email newsletter list, this is what I wanted to show. Look how big this bag is. It measures about 14 inches by 14.5 tall and then 6 inches wide here. But you can pack a ton in here. And if we go ahead, I'm going to show you this way before we swap over to the other camera angle. But you can see the inside. It is lined, but it's not lined where it has to be birthed out through an opening in the lining. Instead, it's made more like a quilt where you have the exterior, the lining, and some type of batting in between, and it's sandwiched together. So it still does not have any raw edges. You can kind of see that pop of that coral colored fabric down around the base at the bottom, and that's because we machine bind the raw edges. And then the side seams, we actually end up doing French seams. So it still gives you that finished look that you're probably going for without needing to use that technique of birthing it through a hole in the lining, okay? So this bag right now is on sale for $10 off the regular price. The link is in the description box. We'll pop it in the chat for y'all too. I call it my 2-hour tote, even though a lot of my students in past years have told me it took them longer than 2 hours to make, but the first one always takes longer, right? If you make a couple of them, you'll get there to where it's a quicker make once you understand how all the pieces come together. So it's just a big open tote. To save time as well, we use just webbing, store-bought webbing. It could be cotton webbing or poly or nylon webbing. And then it has just one big opening. There's no smaller pockets on the inside. But then on the exterior, we have a pocket here and a pocket here. I love to pack this one full, snacks and stuff for a quick picnic, you know, where you don't need it to be insulated. But you could make it an insulated one as well. You could even add snaps here if you wanted to close it like a really large picnic or lunch bag or something. But I always take this one to my retreats. So that's why I thought of this when I pulled this question. And I remember that some of the ladies this weekend at the retreat were like, oh, what bag is that? It's pretty big. Because I packed it full of stuff. So if you want a step-by-step video course that's on demand, meaning it's not live, you can watch the videos whenever you want, as many times as you want, this online course is on sale then for $10 off. and it's called My 2-Hour Tote. The link is in the video description box below. And just so you know, it includes a PDF with some written instructions that just help supplement the videos, but then it's 8 step-by-step video lessons. So it is beginner friendly. This one is, the bottom panel is not boxed. It has a bottom, like a panel that's inset in there, and I think it's pretty cool the way that I teach you to do that. So even if you've never done that before for this technique, it's worth signing up for that class so you can check it out and learn the techniques, okay? All right, awesome. Hi, Jackie. She says, I'm late, but I'm here. Great, great, great. All right, so let's go ahead. I just wanted to share that. Other than that, I was just going to say, if you are going to make a bag that doesn't have a lining, I would steer more towards the thicker fabrics, the faux vinyl, the faux leathers, the vinyls and things like that, that can stand on their own. And then you can either serge, zigzag stitch the edges, or if you're working with one of those types of specialty fabrics, most of them don't fray. So you can just cut a clean edge in the seam allowance and just leave it raw. And some people like that, some people don't. So you got to keep those things in mind when you're choosing to make those types of projects. Okay. My next question here is from Judy. And Judy asks, why don't my bag straps come out smooth to the touch? I'm using cotton fabric and lined with Pellon 101 interfacing, which is SF 101. Let's go ahead and switch them to my over-the-shoulder camera shot here. And I'm going to share a couple tips with you and see if I can try and figure out what Judy is talking about and mentioning and what could be the possible cause for it, okay? So here I have a strap. Granted, I'm not sure what the technique of strap making is that she's following or that she likes to use. If you're going by bag designers' steps, for the technique, usually we do some version of this where you have a strip of fabric, the pattern will tell you what width to cut it out to, and then they'll have you fold it in half, you press, you open it, and then you fold in both long edges towards that center crease so that you can hide the raw edges on the long edges, but also so you can quadruple up the fabric and make it a little bit thicker and more substantial of a strap, okay? So usually it goes like this. Then you would go and top stitch along the long edges. But if you've ever made a strap like this out of just using cotton fabric, you know that that strap is going to be kind of all flimsy. And usually if it's a strap, you want it to have some substance and shape to it. So in this sample here, I think you can even see it, how much flimsier this guy is versus this one. Even the folds are crisp, okay? So this is the same thing, but I fused Bosal Fashion Fuse, which is the cotton woven fusible interfacing that I prefer to use, and it's the one that we sell in our online shop. So what this is, it's basically a very thin layer of cotton fabric that on one side has tiny dots of adhesive that you fuse to the wrong side of your fabric. And you can see it basically makes it so it's about the weight of 2 layers of quilting cotton. Not quite, it's like a little bit thinner on that second layer of the fashion fuse, but similar. So if I fuse the entire thing, and not all patterns will call for you fusing that cotton woven fusible interfacing to the whole strip. Some of them will have you cut a strip that's just this wide, and so you're just putting it right in there. I went ahead and fused it to the whole thing, so I'm quadrupling up all the layers. The fabric layers times 4, and the interfacing layers times 4. So that means I'm going to get a strap that's a lot stiffer and more substantial than one with just fabric alone, okay? So yes, I see Margie's mentioning in here the 2-Hour Tote is from the 2019 Bag Club. It is. It was one of the bags that we did back in 2019 Bag Club, and I don't think that that bag club is available to join the whole club. So that is one of the bags, and you can sign up for it now on sale. So yes, thanks Margie for posting that in there. Okay. Alice is, let me just answer this question real quick. Alice is saying, I bought the must-have tote bag course back from 2010. Is this the same course? It's not. It's a totally different bag, different size, different techniques and everything. Yeah, this one was featured in the 2019 Bag Club. So if you signed up for my 2019 Bag Club back in 2019, which was the only time you could have signed up for it, then that's right? It's not up there? I don't think it is. Yeah. Then you wouldn't have had access to this course otherwise, aside from signing up for it individually like it is on sale now. Okay. So this one is a lot stiffer. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to stitch down both of these, because for those of you that maybe are new to bags or are thinking about, making little zippered pouches and adding a strap, whether it's a handle strap, crossbody strap, or even a wristlet, you're going to want to have down a couple, of little techniques in your back pocket to make the strap the way that you want yours to be, okay? So if I have just fabric and I've prepped it and I'm going to stitch it the same way, remember for top stitching, we usually lengthen our straight stitch, So I'm going to keep it at 3 millimeters, and I'm going to do the same on both samples, okay? And then I'm going to stitch this 1/8 of an inch in along both long edges, okay? And we're going to compare the straps on how they look. Make sure I line this up. And see, because this fabric isn't interfaced, it's moving a little bit more on me, right? It's just cotton fabric. And that this fabric was starched. So if it wasn't starched and you're not a starcher, it's going to move on you even more, because the weave is not that, the fabric is not that densely woven. So it's considered a medium weight fabric. Quilting cotton is, I would say, at least from people that sew garments, we can go really, really thin and lightweight on fabric. So this is more like medium weight, but it's still very fluid, especially when it comes to moving on you and getting, a little bit wonky and distorted. Okay. So here is my strap, and can you see how there's like little ripples in it? There's like little drag lines on it because the fabric's not stabilized. So because I stitched down one way and then turned my strap and stitched down the other way, that fabric was slightly distorted because the grain line is being pushed in one direction, as I sewed that way, and then I sewed in the opposite direction, so now it's pulling this way. And so then you end up with some light ripples that you can see right there, okay? Not a big deal. If you give it a press, it'll lie flat. But that's just to show you that even when the fabric is starched, I'm still changing up that grain line depending on how I'm pushing and pulling it, especially as I run it through my sewing machine, okay? So this was the one with no interfacing. Now look at this one. I don't even have any clips on it or anything, and I know that if I just fold it like this, I'm going to barely need to manipulate it because it's interfaced. So that is the point. Sometimes people will ask, like, well, why is it called for like 3 different interfacings in a project? Well, they each serve their purpose, okay? And so you need them for different things. Sometimes you want to add a little bit of loftiness or plushness to the inside. We're going to use something like a fusible fleece or a batting or something. If we want something to be stiffer and crisper, we can use multiple layers of a cotton woven fusible interfacing, or in my case, because I have, access to a lot of different interfacings, y'all know me, and I like my Bosal Durafuse, which is a crisp non-woven interfacing that's more paper-like. So I know if I want something to be crispy like that, that's the interfacing that I will usually go for. So I'm going to put these two side by side and show you the difference. So, I mean, this is where you can tell, okay? When I bend this like this, say this was a handle on a purse, look at that. Perfect curve, right? And it just kind of bends back and forth. Nice and crispy, like stiff. This one, look what happens. Can you see up top where the seam is? The fabric is almost lifting away from the seam itself. You see those ripples on the inside? You can kind of see that. It's just the fabric has more places to move and ways to bounce and move and all that because it's not interfaced. So depending on the look that you're going for, this is just one type of interfacing versus another, okay? If I wanted to be a little bit more plush, what I usually will do is create a little bit of a casing, like how this fabric one was, but I would tuck in something like a strip of batting or a strip of Bosal Interform, which is what this is, okay? Now, I'm going to show you on a finished sample here. These I made so that they were a little bit narrower just so you can see. Now, where's the question here? Judy was saying that her bag straps are not coming out smooth to the touch. So to me, I'm wondering if her question has to do with these little bits of ripples in here. If that is the case and you did something like that where it was just fabric by itself, or fabric that was really like an open weave, you may consider adding more interfacing, because I know she said that she used the cotton woven fusible interfacing, the Pellon version, which is Shape Flex 101. I'm not sure what happened there because, as you saw, I used also a cotton woven fusible interfacing, and mine is smooth to the touch. I haven't even pressed it yet, but if you give it a little bit of a press and set it with a wooden tailor's clapper if you have one. Of course, this is a super handy tool, and we do carry these in our online shop if you don't yet have one. It helps everything just lie flat. Whether it's a crease, a hem, a folded up strap, whatever it is, you can just hit it with an iron and then clap it down and it stays just like that. So I'm thinking either the fabric was like a looser weave, and maybe that could have caused you some issues, or another issue that you could have run into there and made it so that it wasn't as smooth as it should be is that maybe the interfacing adhesive wasn't fully melted down. If you've used fusible interfacing and stabilizers before, you know that sometimes if you kind of partially fuse things to the cotton fabric, you may end up with like a bumpy-ish feel and it's not completely smooth. In those instances, I will usually spray my project with water, just from like my little spray mist bottle. This is a very handy tool because it doesn't spray like a hard spray. And we do have these in our shop too, those little mist spray bottles. And then hit it with the heat of a dry iron. And so the moisture, when the heat hits it from the iron, it creates that steam. And oftentimes that will help further melt the adhesive so it fuses a little bit better to your fabric, okay? And then that helps things lie a little bit flatter. All right. So hopefully that helps. Again, if you're not happy with just using the cotton woven fusible interfacing in your straps, consider using a fusible or even a non-fusible batting. If you have batting scraps, save them because you can cut those strips and make them into straps. What I will share though too is one of my favorite ways to make straps. And I'll share with you a project that we worked on this weekend at my retreat. This is a chunky wee bag. It's just like a little messenger shaped bag with a panel of pockets in here. We do have some of the patterns left in stock. They're hard copy patterns. And this is a design by Hunter Design Studio by Sam Hunter. So if anybody wants to grab one of those, they're in the shop, you know, while supplies last right now. But if you have a look at the strap on this, it's wider, more substantial. There is no metal hardware here. It's inserted on the side with these fabric strap connectors, so you know it's going to be a nice sturdy strap for you to wear over the shoulder or even crossbody. Now, when I make straps like this, and this one might be a little tricky to see because it's black, so let me lighten this up just a hair. I always got to be manipulating this thing because of the lighting, okay? But I have another one in another color here too. This is another one that I made. So look at these straps, okay? On this one, you can tell that I have multiple lines. Remember how on this strap I said we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge down both long edges. Well, on a narrow strap like this one, that works because you don't really need to go in the middle, and I usually can figure that out by bending it. If I top stitch along both long edges and I go like this, if it bends good, then I can leave it at that. But when you go with a wider strap that also has fusible batting on the inside, if you only top stitch along the outer long edges, this entire section in the middle will not have any stitching on it. And so in that case, when you go like this, it gets a little bit like pointy and square, and it doesn't just curve smooth like that. So when I'm making wider straps that are filled in with either foam or fusible batting, what I prefer to do is actually go in and do more lines. So I'll stitch the first 2 along the long edges, and then I'll go like 1/4 of an inch in on each side and do 2 more lines of top stitching, and then I usually will just center my presser foot along those last 2 lines and do 1 more line of stitching, making it 5 lines of top stitching right down the middle. And that stitching helps flatten out the bulk of the fusible fleece, the batting, or the foam that's inside, and makes it so that my strap can be a little bit more fluid and pliable like this, okay? And that's how I can tell. Anytime I'm making a strap for a bag, I just go like this. And if it's rounded, I'm happy with it. Okay, if it's still a little bit choppy, I'll go in and do a couple more lines of top stitching if I need to. Okay, so hopefully that helps, and y'all can start playing around with some different straps on your different bag projects. The width effects, and then also what stabilizer or interfacing you're using on the inside, and you can, you know, adjust your technique accordingly. Okay, let me pop into the chat real quick and see if I have, oh, Diane, good eyes. You saw me use it already. She says, is that a new iron? And it is. We tested it out this weekend at the retreat. There were 8 of us sewing and fusing up a storm using different interfacings. And so I told everybody, if you're going to use it, let me know what you think. And we all loved it. So I'm going to be getting a couple more of these for my next upcoming retreats. It is a T-fall iron. I know a lot of you ask me about the other iron that I use on a lot of these videos, but they no longer make that T-fall version. So this one is another one, and we have my affiliate link where you can use it, and that way I'll get a small percentage too, and if you like it, you know, you can get it on Amazon, which is where I got mine too. All right? But yes, really good. So far I haven't put water in it because y'all know I live on a property with a well. But using the spray mist bottle and then just using the iron, it's a little lighter than my other one, but it still has enough weight. I like a lot of weight when I'm pressing my seams, especially for handbag straps like that. I need those creases to really have a little weight behind them. Yes. All right. Diana says, why is it so popular to use patterns, especially with bags? I regularly make it from my head rather than someone else's drawings. So a lot of times people that like to sew or quilt and make these types of projects, maybe they're not good at math. Maybe they can't visualize the three-dimensional object in their mind, and so we use patterns. The same thing goes for garment sewing. Yes, a lot of times you can make it, but it's also like a template shortcut that will allow you to get exactly what you want without you needing to make multiple prototypes to get there, okay? All right, let's see. Oh, Jamie says that iron is amazing. Yes, she got to use it this weekend. So Diana's asking, where did I get it? I got it off of Amazon, and we have the affiliate link in there for them that we can post. So we'll put it in underneath in the description box of the video or in the chat where y'all can check it out, okay? And see exactly the model and all that to make sure that you're getting the right one. Okay, let's see. Okay. Windless Original says, my water is fine to use and I still like the mister better. It is. It kind of gives you like a light misting of water versus like a spritz in one area or a sputter of a steam, you know, going through in the, coming out of your iron. Yep. Okay. So next question that I have on here, let me look at my little list, my pen. Okay, the next two questions, I'm going to kind of talk about them together because one leads right into the other. So the next question is from Jay, and Jay says, I'm always confused about how I'm supposed to let the fabric fold when I go to square it up after it comes off of the bolt. I'm sure a lot of you probably can relate and have that issue, whether you're a quilter or a bag maker or whatever. I'm going to scoop my machine out of the way because I'm going to need more table space here to talk about this cutting. So let me just clear this out a little bit. And then Jay says, however, it says, I think I'm supposed to let it fold naturally, which means the selvage edges don't line up evenly. However, when I do this and line up my ruler with the fold to trim the side, I lose a lot of fabric from the side because of that unevenness. But my understanding is if I try to fold it so the selvage edges are lined up with each other, then that will not actually create a straight cut along the side because the fabric doesn't come off the bolt straight. Can you clarify how to square up fabric right off the bolt? Thanks. Okay, Jay, if you're watching this live or the recording, here we go. I cut a piece of fabric, and this is actually a print that we still have some yardage in our shop. This was a fabric that we included in kits last year during my bag maker subscription box. It's like a tri-colored, it's yellow, black, and white floral. Really pretty. I've used it for a ton of stuff. But I pulled this straight off of a bolt, okay? And it's going to be a little tricky to show y'all, but let's go ahead and give them my front-facing camera shot if you can. Okay, so this is a little bit less than a yard, and I'm going to pick it up with the selvages up towards me. That's where my fingers are. So if you look at my hand, I basically have these three fingers, and in between my thumb and pointer, and then in between my pointer and middle finger, I have one corner and one corner in between each of these slots, okay? So I pinch thumb and pointer, the front part of it, and then I just press up with my middle finger to the back of my pointer finger, the other one. And so I like to do it that way because it's on my tips of my fingers, and I can kind of swoosh the selvages, both ends of them, right, both edges, back and forth to get it to where it's hanging straight. So I lift it up in the air like this over my table, okay? And so the fold is down here and the selvages are up top. Now, if I were to scoot part of the selvage one way, you can kind of start to see how the fabric is pulling in one direction. If I don't drop it and pull it the other way, you can see the drag lines. Do you see how there's a bubble down there by my chest in the fabric? It starts to pull in the other direction. So I know that I can't take it like that where it's like bubbling and distorted and put it flat on my table to cut because it won't work. It will be off grain and your strips are not going to be straight. You're going to get an elbow. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where you have your fabric folded, you cut a strip, and when you open it, it's not straight. It goes straight and then it like peaks up and then it goes down like this because the fabric was not cut straight, okay? And so one of the things that I find that most beginners, or one of the mistakes that I find most beginners make is that they try to line up the design of the fabric with how it's supposed to be straight. Not all fabric is printed straight. Even if the design features lines that are vertical or horizontal or some type of a plaid, it's not going to necessarily be printed straight on grain. So instead, I want the fabric to tell me when it's hanging on grain. So again, I grab those corners at the selvage edge and I kind of just zhuzh it back and forth until the fabric hangs in front of me where I'm looking completely flat and straight. When I see that, and I'm still pinching the edges here, I'm not touching the bottom part. So that means gravity's doing the work for me. And once it's straight, I will just plop it on my table and just let it flop down. I'm going to switch you to this camera angle and show you what the selvages look like right here when this was on grain. So let's go ahead and give them the over-the-shoulder camera shot. All right, so now I'm going to slide this down and let's peek at the selvage. And I'm trying to hold it steady. Do you see where the selvage is? The top of the selvage is almost a full 3/4 of an inch higher than this bottom edge of the selvage, okay? If we come to the other side, same thing. It's off in the height and it's 1/2 of an inch off here. So if I put this gray mat here so y'all can see, and I'm still holding the 2 layers flat, I want you to see what I'm talking about here. So if I'm only looking at it from this side, it looks like it's fine. But when you peek back, look at the difference. It's way shorter. And then also in this direction, it's way shorter. It's 1/2 of an inch off here. So this is the part that we need to trim off to clean off this edge. Now that we know that the fabric is hanging straight, it's on grain, carefully flop it on the table, and then you're gonna peek over and see how much do I need to trim off this way in order to start off where both edges, right? The right side edge of both layers is completely straight. Then you can start measuring over from that for your strips, your patchwork pieces, your bag straps or whatever it may be, okay? So that is how I do it, okay? And see, I messed it up a little bit, so I'm just gonna, and it sounds like it's a long process because I'm kind of breaking it down for y'all how I do it, but look how quick it is. I go like this, hang, 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 I flop, and that's it. I grab my strip ruler, and now I'm cutting, okay? So if I need to cut from this side, I always line up. Now, wherever the fabric folded, where it was hanging, okay, where it's straight on grain, I will position any straight line on my ruler on that fold, okay? And because the ruler is, has 4 corners, whether it's a square or a rectangle, that means that if something is straight here and measured up against a line of the ruler straight here, that means that this is going to be a 90-degree angle here, and the ruler should be going straight here. And just by having my ruler here, I can see that this is off. I have about 3/4 of an inch sticking out here, and all the way up top, I only have about 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to peek under here, make sure that I'm cutting through both layers, and I'm going to slide it a little so I don't waste too much fabric. And I'm only cutting away the minimal amount that I can in order to get 2 straight edges. And that looks good there. So, and I put some pressure on the ruler, slide my fingers up since this is a 24-inch long ruler. I peel off what I cut, and then I can flip it over and not make it look like it's short. It's not. It all matches up. Here we go. So there, okay? So it all matches up, and now you know this is straight, this is straight. I can start now cutting my strips from here, okay? So that's how I like to do it. And then, let's see, the next question leading from this one is from Elaine, and Elaine says, how do you start cutting something like 10-inch blocks from a piece of fabric bigger than your cutting mat, like 36 inches by 45, which would be about a yard of fabric. So that's why I got this piece. She says, I know you need a straight edge to start, and I've seen you cut the fabric, but never for from such a big piece. I just don't know how to get started, okay? So this is how I do it. If you have a cutting mat that's 24 inches by 36, which is a good size, like once you start getting into more projects, that's a good size one to have. If you're still working with one of the smaller ones, maybe 18-inch by 24, all I would do is instead of having it flat like this, once I laid it flat and said, okay, it's nice and flat on grain, I would go ahead and grab it here and refold it. Because that way, it should still be the same flat. If you see that it's distorted a little bit, you're going to have to do it again and then plop it down and not try to shake it, move it from side to side. But this is going to make it shorter. So if you don't have a longer strip ruler, you can cut this with a 12-inch ruler versus a 24-inch one. So there's ways. You just keep folding your fabric to make it a little bit shorter or narrower. If your mat is not quite as wide as you would like it to be, just fold the fabric like this, cut what you can, right, on it, and then open it up, smooth it, cut the next bit, and then cut the next bit. You know what I mean? You don't have to have a huge cutting table unless you're, you know, doing this a lot or for a business or something is usually why we start upgrading to bigger and bigger cutting mats, because it saves us time in the end, okay? All right. Let's see. Diana says, my grandmother taught me to sew and taught me to imagine it, draw it if needed, and then sew it. It's odd to me every time someone asks me for my patterns because I just made it up. Not everybody's like that. You know, a lot of people need guidance and they want a pattern or a kit. Have you seen the kit business in quilting and in bag making? So many companies and shops sell kits because people don't want to have to figure out which fabrics go together. They don't want to have to figure out the math of how much fabric do I need to make the bag this size. And so you just follow the template. You know, it's like a blueprint for the project. And it's oftentimes a little bit more enjoyable for people than having to deal with all the math in there. Okay. All right, Anne is asking what type of cutting mat I'm using, and I'm using a cutting mat that I've had for months now. I'm still deciding whether or not I like it or love it. It gets the job done, and for filming my videos, it helps because it's white, right, versus being a darker mat. This I got from, I always forget the company name. I bought it custom sized, like I gave them the dimensions of my big table here, and I got it custom cut to that. It is called the Big Mat Rotary Cutting Surface. That's what it's called. BigMatRotaryCuttingSurface.com is the website that y'all can check out. It's not a self-healing mat, so I will just say that. You have to like scrape the bits off, and I'm sure it gets, you know, used up over time. I'm probably pretty soon, because I work in this one space, I can see all the cuts. So I'm pretty soon probably going to have to flip it just so that I can start cutting on this further bit here and not cutting so much. See, Deborah says, I really like kits that makes it so easy. It does. You know, there's something for everybody out there. All right, so for this one, what did I say? Elaine was asking, how do you start, what did I say? Cutting it off from here. Yes. So then, oh, I don't see the one question, but it was somebody that had asked, how do you cut like 10-inch by 10-inch square pieces from yardage like this? So now that we talked about hanging the fabric on grain, plopping it down, potentially double folding it if you're working on a smaller cut surface. Now, if you're right hand dominant like me, so you don't have to keep like picking up the fabric and flopping it over, once you have it down like this, it just makes sense, especially if it's from a larger yardage piece, to start cutting from this side. So the way that I would do it is, y'all probably know if you watch my videos, is using my 2 rulers. Okay, this is what I call 2 ruler trick, but this is how I've been cutting for, I don't know, 15 years or something. So if I wanted to cut 10-inch by 10-inch squares from my own yardage for a pattern that calls for pre-cuts, okay, but you have fabrics that you want to use, I do the same thing I just did. I cut a little bit to clean off the edge, and then I'm going to take my ruler, and this is the Crafty Gemini 5-inch by 10-inch ruler, and it's perfect for this because you can cut both 5-inch squares or 10-inch squares. So the 10-inch is going to be the full length of the ruler, and I'm just going to position the whole thing like a template. Flush along the clean cut edge and flush at the bottom on the fold. Okay, then I take a second ruler and I bump it up. So the way the 2 rulers work is that you're using one to measure and one to cut. Remember that. One to measure, one to cut. So this guy is my measure. I slide it up. I see that I'm still maintaining the full width that I want here. I've measured. I bumped up the other one to it. I can now remove this guy because I've measured. This is the piece I want. And now I use my second ruler to cut. So 1 ruler to measure, 1 ruler to cut. So now this is a 10-inch strip. You would continue cutting that another 10-inch. So I would just scoot over from here. And if you're cutting out, say, maybe 5 yards, like a huge piece of fabric, and you're doing the same thing over and over again, I would stop every 2 to 3 cuts and double check that this edge is straight. Because without you knowing it, every time you continue cutting in one way, sometimes you kind of tweak that ruler a little and a little and a little and a little. So by the time you make the 6th strip cut, it might be like, whoop, a little bit wonky. So every 2 to 3 cuts, stop and make sure that this is straight again. If it's not, shave a little sliver off and then continue again, okay? So from this guy, after you have all your 10-inch strips cut, then I would open it up this way, okay? And now I would trim off the selvage edge from this edge. And I'm not even going to pick it up and move it over because I know that like this, it's on grain. So on this, because of how it came on the bolt, I'm wasting a little bit, about an inch or so, 3/4 of an inch of that. But I've cut it clean off. I don't have selvages in my project, okay? Then we do the same thing because I'm cutting a 10-inch by 10-inch square. So if you're a quilter, you already are familiar with this type of cutting technique where you first cut your strip to one dimension, then you turn it horizontally like this in front of you, and you're cutting now the second dimension. In the case of a 10-inch square, it's 10-inch, and then I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to cut 10-inch again, right? Because I'm cutting squares. So again, I take my Crafty Gemini 5x10 ruler, and I'm doing 10 again. So the ruler goes bumped up to the cut edge, so that's there. And then I'm going to take this ruler and bump it up here, and I'm just measuring, make sure I have 10 inches the whole way up. So now I use this one to measure. I've measured. I'm going to use this secondary ruler here to cut. And right there, because the strip has been folded up, I have two 10-inch by 10-inch squares. And then you would just continue like this, okay? You can cut 4 out of the width of quilting cotton. So usually if you're following a pattern that's calling for you to do that, they'll usually tell you how many strips to cut. So you know how many of these squares you need to end up cutting for, you know, for that pattern or that quilt design or whatever. But again, 10 inches, come over, and that gives me 2 more. So I have 4 of them cut from one 10-inch strip by the width of the fabric, and then you have this little scrap piece left over that you could use for other patchwork stuff. Okay, so that is how I would hang the fabric on grain, cut my strip straight, and even sub-cut it down to make your own pre-cuts, whether they're 5-inch or 10-inch squares. If it was 5-inch, I would do the same thing. I would just measure 5 inches, cut a bunch of 5-inch strips, turn the strip, and then go 5, 5, 5, 5 like that. Same thing, okay? All right. So that is it. I don't see any other specific questions here for me. Those are all the questions I had on my list. So again, just another quick recap for anybody that maybe is tuning in. We were talking about bags that don't need to be birthed. And I was saying that we are running a flash sale right now for one of my online courses. I have almost 90 of them. But this guy right here is my 2-hour tote bag. It's just a big open tote that's good size. No raw edges, everything is bound. There's no hand sewing, because I know some of y'all see binding and you freak out and think, I can't hand sew. It's all done by machine, and it looks great. We do French seams, so if you don't know how to do that, you'll learn how to do that. And then we bind the raw edges along the bottom, which is great because it's a good way to practice a binding technique. You can kind of see a peek in there of the binding at the bottom panel. It's a great way to practice a machine stitching binding on with without worrying about it looking ugly, like exposed on the front. It's all the way at the bottom of the bag. So it's a great way to practice that technique, okay? So this bag is $10 off the course for it is $10 off the regular price right now. The sale price ends on Sunday, on Mother's Day, May 14th, 2023. And again, the finished dimensions, because I always get questions, is 14 inches across by 14.5 tall by 6 inches wide. Okay, and we used webbing for the straps. That saved us even more time. So the link for that is in the video description box and in the chat here. So if you want to check that out, check it out. Thanks again for watching another WIP Wednesday episode, y'all. Happy sewing or quilting, and I'll see y'all in the next video.